Hello, this is a little bit of a philosophical video about how we approach other people, how we communicate. But before I get into that, just a quick update on the attack in Utrecht. There is some information circulating around. Well, some of the press has reported that it may be that this attacker, who was of Turkish descent, um, attacked a woman. It was a former partner or something to that extent. As always with attacks, there's mixed reports going around. If that's true, it's just as awful. It's just as heinous. Um, but that would come into maybe an honor crime as opposed to so-called honor crime, I should say, as opposed to a terrorist attack against wider society. Although it would once again indicate how important integration is. A Turkish friend of mine actually said that the guy was working for his words, Islamofascist Erdogan. Um, Erdogan's an odious creep, and I think that we need to be backing. The whole Brexit thing has caused a bit of a rift with our new European neighbours. But times like this, we need to be vocally backing them. Um, so when Erdogan was stoking up Turkish nationalistic demos in the streets of Germany and the streets of the Netherlands, in Hamburg and Rotterdam and so on, um, and then he has the audacity to play the victim. It's absolutely repugnant. Erdogan is a thug. He's a demagogue, and he's the worst sort of populist. And I think Western countries need to start standing up to him. I understand that Turkey is an important regional power, but this man cannot just be permitted to continue insulting Western countries with baseless insinuations, stoking the flames. He is basically a Muslim Donald Trump. Um, and he's an odious creep, in my opinion. Anyway, to get into the main gist of this video, it's really pertinent to the approach that I take on my channel, and that is niceness versus honesty. With this channel, I believe that the single most important thing in my direction in terms of how I approach these videos is self-honesty. Sure, it would be nice to be popular, and I take no pleasure from videos where the ratio of thumbs down is greater than thumbs up, but they're extremely rare. Most of the feedback I get is positive, I'm pleased to say, but that's not my guiding principle. My guiding principle is to use this as a platform where I can air my views basically with the world. And some videos get a lot of views, most don't get that many, but it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. I know this sort of channel is not, I don't have any special effects. I don't do any one-liners. It's that's fine. I'm just grateful for the opportunity really to have the platform. Um, big tech companies get a lot of heat these days, but at the same time, they give us a platform, so I'm grateful for that side of it. Okay, so niceness versus honesty. I try to conduct myself with people, and this isn't just about cyberspace, this is about the real world as well. I try to conduct myself in a civil way. I try to treat people in a general sense with respect and courtesy. And I really do value politeness. It's one thing that I hold quite highly. So, I always say thank you when someone gives me something. I always say please when I want something. This is just elementary etiquette. It's not about being old fashioned or anything. It should be just being a decent human being. Um, so I do get a little bit irritated when, particularly in shops, when people are blunt or rude. There's just no need for it. Simple as that. If you're having a long day at work, don't take it out on customers. And likewise, customers, if you're stressed out, you know, if your complaint's valid, but just deal with things in a civil way. That's all I would say. I mean, I get it. The world can be irritating when things don't work. I don't want to be a hypocrite. I've lost my temper on more than one occasion. But I've always tried to temper that by thinking, okay, maybe I was a bit harsh with that person. So then I immediately try to rectify it, not necessarily apologize, but tone it down. You have to self-regulate. I think it's very, very important. Otherwise, having self-control is a basic mark of just dealing with the world in a decent way. Because if we have no self-control, if we always blow up, that's not healthy. The world will test us. The world can be a very frustrating place, and certainly getting irritated and getting frustrated can be very justified at times. I'm not one of these annoying people that say, "Oh, just take it easy, everything's fine." And there are times when it's justified to be annoyed and frustrated when things don't need to be the way they are. So yeah, but I also think that so that side of it, being civil, being polite, that's something I value. But there are also times, particularly when it comes to political discourse, that you have to put any fears of, oh, how will this person perceive me aside. Because if you constantly worry about what people will think about you, you'll never be open, you'll never be honest about how you feel. Now, I appreciate certain circumstances, people don't want to be that upfront about things, that's understandable. There's times when people don't want to engage, and I think that's fine. I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. Obviously, elected politicians have to, it's their job to debate, to discuss issues. But, put it this way, people in this country right now are unlikely, I would think, to go into a pub and say to a total stranger, oh, what's your view on Brexit? Because they know it's an emotive, divisive subject, and it would just start an argument, it would create an awkward situation. Just most people wouldn't do that. I wouldn't. And if someone asked me, I'd probably try and change the subject. Or if I was honest, I'd measure my words, not to please them, just because I wouldn't want to, I don't think I should be obliged to enter that sort of discourse. So there's nothing wrong with debate. There's nothing wrong with discussing things, but you can't impose on people. You can't force people to debate an issue. Sometimes people just want a bit of time, or they just don't want to talk about something because it's divisive. Some people really love getting into the thick of it and they love a good fight. A lot of people don't. And I think you have to respect that. You have to respect that not everyone wants to get into that. Why do you believe this? And justify that. On the other hand, if you are going to be vocal about things, you can't then run away when people challenge you. That's also true. Um, I've been accused of that a few times on this channel, but I think I've also been very clear about the thing about cyberspace. There is a different dynamic there because there's issues like hacking, there's issues like trolling that you don't get in the real world. So I do think there's a different dimension with cyberspace. The way I see it, I always show my face. Most of those who troll me, I'm not talking about people who disagree with me, but those who troll me, I do find it funny that when I go to their channels, they have no content. And just for the record, some people say, oh, Nathan, take it easy. They're not. But you guys are misunderstanding because I'm not bothered by them. I'm not bothered by them. I'm just pointing out what the situation is, that is the dynamic that I am addressing or that I am reflecting on. But the civility doesn't mean being a pushover. Civility doesn't mean not robustly speaking our minds. There are some subjects I have very strong opinions on, and in a political context, well, let me put it this way: if I was a political candidate and my opponent had a position that I strongly, strongly disagreed with, that I felt was bad for society, I'll just give an example here, just as a sort of, just to provide an example. Let's say the subject was on crime. But let's say my opponent, I was standing in an election, my opponent had a position of, oh, we need to understand them, it's all down to poverty, and let's not be too hard. And they took a very inconvenient approach, I would vocally condemn it and I would robustly attack them on that. And the thing about politics is you need to focus on policy. As soon as people get into ad hominems about how someone looks or some more personal things, family things, and so on, that's, as far as I'm concerned, when they're scraping the barrel. Now, I take issue with a lot of Jeremy Corbyn's politics and a lot of senior conservatives as well. But I would never endorse something like one thing I dislike about the tabloids is some of their attacks on Corbyn haven't been to do with policy, which is legitimate, but ad hominems, which is not. It's just not. It's childish, it's crude, and it just doesn't win arguments. I'm not talking about satire, I think that's a different thing, but I'm talking about when there's an obsession. I think one mistake the Tories made early on in the Corbyn leadership is when they did obsess over his appearance, the way he dressed, and so on. I get it in a 24-hour media digital age. Appearance does matter probably more than it should, but they obsessed a bit about that when they should have been focusing on policy areas. Um, so as soon as someone gets into ad hominems about, I mean, I've been attacked, for example, because I'm a redhead. Now, I don't get offended by it because how's it, how's it an insult? It's just pointing out my hair color. Just, I was bullied a bit for that in school, but I don't get triggered by that because I sort of think, well, yeah, I'm a redhead. Well spotted. What's your point? You know, um, I remember when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, there were people who got into very personalised ad hominem attacks, and I quote, that one-eyed Scottish git. How does any of that get into criticising the man on policy? None of it does. It's crude. It's scraping the barrel. It's just people who do that are weak. It's a weak argument, and some people just can't help themselves, can they? Their tiny, puny little brains cannot conduct an argument without doing that. And I've seen it on left and right, with the left and right. Neither side can claim total innocence in this regard. I've seen right wingers attack Diane Abbott purely on her appearance. To those people, I say you're wrong. You're not exposing her policies. You're not exposing her racist attitude, which she has a record of. All you're doing is making yourselves look like schoolyard bullies. It's pathetic. So ad hominems in that sense, ad hominem is not saying, for example, I don't interpret ad hominem as attacking someone on policy. So, for example, saying, "Oh, you're a namby-pamby liberal," I wouldn't regard that as ad hominem. It's perhaps a bit rude, undiplomatic, but I don't consider it ad hominem because liberal it's a political persuasion. It's nothing to do with appearance. Likewise, saying you're a Tory bastard. Apologies for the language, but I'm just presenting examples here of, these are, it might be rude, it might be undiplomatic. I don't regard attacks on policy or political ideology to be ad hominem at all. And I think there is a place for them because if politics is too nice, if politics is too, what's the word, filtered, then I think we do risk losing honesty. And after all, we want politicians to be honest. So a bit of robust debate, I think, is a good thing. Obviously, you need some barriers. I mean, in Parliament, like I said the other day, it's a bit pathetic when grown men and women are, heckling each other like a bunch of football hooligans. That is a bit pathetic. But on a contentious issue, I want rigorous debate, and I also want, keeping with this subject, I want journalists to ask tough questions. I think there is bias in the media, and I think that they have a lot to do to, show that they're not. All networks. I mean, when you go harshly on one candidate from one party, but then give another a free ride, that comes across. People notice it. Um, and I also think that where journalists have a right to ask tough questions, what I don't like is gotcha style questions. So Jeremy Paxman's one of the worst offenders. His style of interviewing is not robust. It's not putting him on the spot. It's just being obnoxious. So there is a difference between being a good journalist, being thorough, asking the right questions and putting legislators on the spot, and just being an ass. Paxman's a smart guy, but he is also pretty obnoxious, and I'd like to see less of that. I want something in the middle. I think someone like Andrew Marr is good. Marr asks tough questions, but he's always polite about it. He never raises his voice. He never sort of, I like his approach. So I think there's a lot of ways to look at how we conduct ourselves. And I guess I'm just using political examples because that's all about the power dynamic. But this can apply in business. It can apply in everyday life. Forget politics for a second. It can apply in everyday life. How we conduct ourselves. You know, some people are so used to debating that I think they get a bit of a hard edge, and they can seem a little bit gritty, a little bit cold. But I think that's a defense mechanism. And other people who have a naturally amicable personality end up getting hurt because the sad truth is people do take advantage of nice people. People who don't like conflict, people who, and that's not always a good thing either. I mean, on one hand, it's not good for those people because then they get taken advantage of. But also, people can then start thinking they don't really believe in anything, and then it gets into a trust issue. So what I'm driving at is there are times you just have to say what you believe. Um, but there's nothing wrong with judging a situation on its own merit. There are times when I'm not going to just bluntly say what's on my mind because you have to judge a situation on its own. Step for example, there's someone who's high up to their eyeballs in some class A drug, and they're swinging around, lashing around. Maybe they're acting violently as a result of that. I'm not going to go up to them and say, "Oh, you need to be arrested," because that would just give them an invitation to lash out at me. Most normal people would not provoke someone like that. Even if you're tough, you can handle yourself. Someone like that is very dangerous. So the natural thing would be to let the police handle it. Um, so anyway, there's a lot of ways to look at this. Let me know your thoughts. I think it's just about, yes, civility and politeness is important, and like I said, I do value those things. But that doesn't mean niceness. It doesn't mean saying what people want to hear, or constantly self-censoring in case we offend someone. Ultimately, I think it's about being true to ourselves. And if you're true to yourself, this is what I've found. I mean, my confidence has soared over the years. I used to be I used to really lack confidence, and I'm not going to lie and say it's perfect these days, but it's definitely improved. I have no problem saying what's on my mind, particularly in these videos and in the real world. Someone asks me, I'm going to tell them, but I'm not necessarily going to seek out a situation. So, I think I get the balance good. Thanks for watching, and let me know your thoughts.